Okay, welcome to the Sustainability Happy Hour broadcast. My name is Pat Keys. I'm the lead scientist at the School of Global Environmental Sustainability at Colorado State University. And this is my co-host, Micah.
Hello, my name is Micah. I'm the communications specialist for SoGES. That's all I got.
That's all you got. That's all you got today.
That's all I am.
You don't need a lot, but we should say cheers before we get any further.
Yes, cheers.
Cheers, everybody, for making it through another insane week.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Everybody's insanity is a little bit different, I feel like. I've got the insanity of like working, trying to run a daycare, that sort of insanity, but everybody's got their own insanity,
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to try and do today is we're just going to talk a little bit about kind of what it is we're trying to do with the Sustainability Happy Hour. And then we're going to dive right into some kind of top news that seems interesting to us. And so we're going to share that. I think you can go ahead and tune in on the comments in the live stream. So if you have comments, we're going to see them and we can try and respond to them. We'll see. If you have questions or ideas or your opinions or whatever. And then later on, we're going to bring in our special guest, Jakob. But without further ado, do you want to dive right into some of the news updates, Micah?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So I've been keeping up with the news, skimming the newsletters, skimming the news headlines, and found a pretty exciting one about CSU. So the Nature, the journal, has a institutional nature index compilation where they figure out how much research output different institutions have put out, and then they rank them. And CSU has been highlighted as a rising star in the Earth and Environmental Sciences category.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and we're actually the 11th fastest riser out of 100. They put 100 in that index. And we're the only one
from globally?
Yeah, and we're the only one from the US in the top 25.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
That's nuts. Go CSU.
Go CSU.
Go Rams.
Yes. It said that this Earth and Environmental Sciences accounts for more than 1/3 of CSU's total research output.
I feel like that makes sense, though, when you think about, like how big some of the, like the Warner College is, and you've got the College of Engineering, or wait a second, the Walter
Scott College, Walter Scott Jr.
Walter Scott Jr. College of Engineering. Okay.
Yeah.
You've got that one, which has atmospheric science, and atmospheric science is sort of a powerhouse on campus, which we'll hear more about with our guests later on. But that's awesome. Go CSU.
Yeah.
And I should say, like, I know that, SoGES isn't very big compared to some of those other places, but maybe we punch above our weight. We publish in Nature every now and then.
Yeah.
We've got somebody, Craig Starger, just posted a comment. Go Rams. All right. Thanks a lot, Craig.
Oh, is it working? Oh, look at that.
It's working. Yeah, it's working.
Oh, we are so technological.
That's right. So sophisticated over
here.
So
modern. Okay. Anyways, next headline. Let's go from good news to less good news. The average wildfire season, we have an average wildfire season likely ahead for Colorado. That's
good.
That's average.
Average. That's average, not good. It's average.
But coronavirus will likely mean less firefighting resources. And this was an article in the Denver Post. And it was something making, the very valid point that with all of the other things that our emergency forces are going to need to be doing, the local firefighting agencies will be short-staffed due to the virus, or they're going to have more work than normal. And then also these social distancing measures, when you've got firefighters and hotshots like living in camps together, it's very hard to keep space between.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely going to be something to keep your eye on this summer as we get into the fire season.
Right.
But I remember when I first moved to Colorado, I think it was we had some really bad fires in 2013, didn't we?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I just remember moving here and like things were smoking and it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
And coronavirus is in the news all the time, and it certainly affects everything. So that's just one more thing. Another another piece of news that I thought was kind of interesting was that I read this article called "Good Grief" in CJR.org,
Okay.
and it struck me because I recently participated in one of these angles training.
What's angles stand for?
That's a great question. We should ask Alita Weller.
Hold on, I'll find out. So we're gonna get it for this for not knowing what this stands for.
I know.
Oh.
But anyways, I recently participated in a webinar about balancing science and advocacy, and it was targeted more towards like researchers and people doing science. But as a science communicator, I found it really interesting as well. And so this article was kind of an opinion piece that I found, was basically talking about how...
Is this the article?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Was basically talking about how when science communicators are writing about topics, particularly climate change, so often scientists are told, just state the facts, like you don't want to be put into an advocacy position. But
right.
so often, I mean, the facts necessitate some advocacy. And similar to how journalists are never truly objective, that's the goal of journalism, is to be purely objective, but we're all humans and like we all bring our values to the table.
How can you not?
Exactly. And that scientists do that as well when they're doing the research. That what this particular journalist was saying was that people responded better to her reporting, where she was a little bit more transparent about the fact that, like, I think climate change is bad and we need to stop it.
Right.
Like simply stating that, rather than trying to put on sort of a false guise of... Yeah,
it's sort of like, how could you possibly, because it would be transparent, like obviously I would think if you study climate change, almost certainly you probably think it's a bad thing.
Right.
Like I don't know of very many people that study climate change are like, this is going to be a pretty good deal. I'm excited about this. And so as an audience member, that though, right? So that this person probably thinks that. So then when they pretend as though they're not bothered by it, it's like,
it seems ingenuine.
Well, come on. Yeah, exactly. It seems ingenuine. That's a good word. That's really interesting though, that when people were more transparent, that it resonated differently. Okay, let's cap off the news segment with what do you think? We've got a bunch of news to cover, but we don't get to cover all of it. So
I know.
What do you think? What do you want to cover?
Oh, we have to cover the murder hornets.
I guess we have to cover the murder hornets.
We do.
Don't we? Okay. How could you not cover the murder hornets?
So
by the way, ANGLE stands for a network for graduate leadership in sustainability.
Good. I'm gonna make a flashcard so I remember that now.
Yeah, do it. Oh, okay. Murder hornets.
So if you haven't heard, they're giant, scary hornets that have potentially migrated over from Asia. And they're called murder hornets because they can devastate honeybee hive populations. Now, of course, that's just a really fun name for a terrifying looking creature.
Yeah. I'll scroll down to show the terrifying picture.
Yes. And I've seen two kind of different perspectives about this story. One is that, yes, it may pose a very big problem for our honeybee populations, which, are already in a lot of danger. And then the other kind of side of that is that a lot of people believe, oh, that's just terrifying.
That's terrifying.
I'll terrifying.
I'll zoom out. Okay.
So it uses those mandibles to decapitate honeybees and eats them.
Yikes.
But what a lot of people are making the point is that we don't necessarily want to be scared of anything that is yellow and stripy and flies.
Right.
The other article I found is that the murder hornet is not going to murder you personally.
Right.
And it's just an interesting, that is a terrifying creature, but at the same time, they're just hunting. They're just
hunting,
living their life.
And I've read some other stuff too, where it's like, if you don't live in like kind of Western or Eastern Washington or kind of southeastern British Columbia, you're probably not going to run into one of these things.
Exactly.
And there are all sorts of other important predatory wasps and predatory hornets that are important parts of our own kind of North American ecology. So one of the sort of downsides of like all of this press about the murder hornet is that now if you happen to come across a horrifyingly huge hornet or wasp, it's probably not one of these things, and it's probably doing something good. Anyway,
but
yeah. So,
scary.
but also if you want to be even more horrified, like if that's something you're into, maybe you could check out how do bees actually protect themselves and defend themselves against the murder hornet. Pro tip: it has to do with heating it up so much so that it burns up from the inside. Anyway, so we've got. Don't worry about murder hornets, though. Okay.
Don't worry about murder hornets.
Don't worry about them.
They're kind of like a horror movie. They're fun to be scared of.
And when you think about these good yellow and black stripy things.
Yeah.
When I've been at home the last week. It's been a little while longer than that. But the dandelions have just come out in the last few weeks, and so I've been walking around with my son saying, okay, well, the dandelions, we don't want to pick them all because they're a really important food source for these bees. They're one of the first food sources in the springtime for a lot of our friends, the honeybees. And so we would try and find the honeybees and point out like these are our good friends. These are the ones that we want to stick around. Maybe not the angry hornets so much, but let's at least just celebrate honeybees, right?
Yeah, let's celebrate honeybees.
Celebrate honeybees. Okay, so with that positive note-ish, we're going to go ahead and welcome our esteemed guest, Jakob Linda. So I'm going to click a button here and add Jakob to the live stream. Are you ready, Jakob? Let's see. Let's try this. Boom. Boom.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Jakob.
Hi, Micah. Hi, Pat.
Hi, Jakob. Welcome, welcome. How are you?
I am, I will say, doing okay.
Doing okay, all right.
I will explain that by my beverage of choice is soup. I actually have a fever that I came down with at 10 a.m. this morning. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
I'm
in bed now. But
okay.
I'm happy to join you.
I can't believe you're joining us still. Wait, are you wearing a Hawaiian shirt?
Oh, he gone.
I am. I saw that last week. Maybe you
got the memo.
Shirts, so.
I did not get the memo.
That's okay.
I have one. I'll wear it next week.
That's okay. I mean, maybe as long as one person wears a Hawaiian shirt on the live stream, then that's gonna like have some continuity to the universe, I think. So
yeah.
I mean, I don't want to know what would happen if somebody didn't wear a Hawaiian shirt to the Sustainability Happy Hour. Okay, so Jakob, thanks for being our guest this week. This is a very serious and formal and important discussion that we're about to have.
Very serious.
Buckle up.
Yes.
But how are you doing? So aside from being sick, how are you coping with all this stuff?
Yeah, I kind of feel like we have, in a large part, kind of adapted to our new situation. Staying at home pretty much 24/7 doesn't feel so abnormal as compared to month and a half ago.
Yeah, fair.
So yeah, I have a nice little desk area set up in my room here now, and we started some plants from seeds, so it's been fun to watch those grow.
Any luck?
Yeah. Almost all of them. Few maybe hot peppers didn't start, but yeah. We have a little 3-season sunroom area that we're keeping all the starters in right now. And
so we've got a message. I have to post this one. We've got a message from who I think it's Marie McGraw. Is that right?
Yes, I can confirm that's Marie.
That's Linda in the Lind house. I love it. That's great.
That could be one name for my abode.
Speaking of Jakob Lindus, do you want to remind me who you are?
Oh yeah, there's that whole thing. Right.
I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. So my name is Jakob Lindas, as you can see down here. And I am a PhD student in atmospheric science. So Pat mentioned earlier, one of the programs that is likely affiliated with this broader Earth and environmental sciences news that Micah was talking about. Yeah, so I'm in atmospheric science, which anybody who knows CSU is actually located out on the Foothills campus instead of on main campus. And we have a great graduate program that I've really enjoyed being a part of. So I am finishing up my 5th year and am actually graduating, defending my PhD in a month and a half or so here. So it's kind of the home stretch. And previously, I came to Colorado by way of Boston, but grew up in Minnesota. So I've kind of bounced across the lower 48 a little bit. And
where did you grow up in Minnesota?
Oh, in Moorhead, so all the way on the western side, right across the river from Fargo, North Dakota. But
nice. I'm from Wisconsin, right outside Minneapolis.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It's interesting how many Midwesterners, especially upper Midwesterners,
there's a lot of
in Colorado.
Yep.
This is always fun to see people. I feel like Colorado has a lot of the fun things that make Minnesota and Wisconsin fun places to live and recreate in, but also bigger mountains.
Mountains, yeah.
And I guess I'll finish up an introduction by saying I'll be bouncing back to the East Coast to Washington.
Don't say that yet. Don't say that part yet.
Oh, never mind. I'm not. We'll see why
we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll talk about that later in a minute or two.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, so really quickly, if you could just let's say I don't know anything about atmospheric science. I know that's the sky, but
sure. Yeah.
Tell me what you do for your research. You said you're going to defend a thesis in a month or so, month and a half. What is that? So, what are you going to be defending?
Yeah. So I study the gases and particles that are in the atmosphere. So we all hopefully remember from maybe high school science that our atmosphere is made up of a number of different gases. Obviously oxygen, which is great for us to survive.
Yeah.
Most of it is nitrogen, almost 80%. And then there's a lot of other gases that are present in very small amounts, but have a very important role, various different roles in the atmosphere. Some of those come from natural things like trees or the ocean. Others come from us humans. And so, we emit a lot of different gases and particles, and some of that is air pollution that will impact our health and well-being, as well as that of our crops sometimes, or other things that we care about. And so that's the general overview of. Right. In general, I might study gases and particles in the atmosphere, but specifically for my PhD, I've been focusing on understanding what is in wildfire smoke. What kind of gases and particles are present in wildfire smoke, and how they change as the wildfire smoke moves from near the fire maybe to downwind where you might breathe it in.
And that's something we don't understand very well?
There are parts of it that we understand really well, and there are parts of it that we're working to understand better. Yeah, so we understand very well that fires as a combustion process emit carbon dioxide, and an incomplete combustion process emit carbon monoxide as well.
What's an incomplete combustion process?
That would be where the fuel doesn't burn all the way. So if all of the carbon in the fuel and oxygen combine and create carbon dioxide and water vapor, then that would be complete combustion, and you would only have carbon dioxide from those carbon atoms in the fuel. And if you some of that process doesn't go all the way to carbon dioxide, then you'll get carbon monoxide, and then a lot, like thousands of other carbon-containing molecules in the smoke. Now, you also, so if you think about burning plants, let me take one step back. I started a bunch of seeds from scratch this spring. I've been watching them grow. One thing
don't burn those.
Yeah, exactly. One thing those seeds need is micronutrients, right? Or elements. Yeah. So they're going to need to have some nitrogen in the soil. They need phosphorus. There's a lot of trace metals that plants need to grow. When plants burn, so your forest burns or your grassland burns, some of those other atoms are also going to get emitted as various gases. Or in the actual particles in the smoke as well. So my work has actually focused more specifically, not just on everything that's in the smoke, because that's enormous. We have teams of people across the country tackling these questions from all angles. I've been focusing a lot on nitrogen in the smoke, and specifically forms of nitrogen that are really reactive. So as the smoke travels, it's all of the, well, not all, but a lot of the different gases and particles are actually undergoing chemical reactions and transforming into other compounds. So just to mention briefly, some of the main nitrogen-containing molecules in smoke are actually ammonia, which we think of as a reduced nitrogen compound, all the way to oxidized nitrogen compounds like nitrogen oxide and nitrogen dioxide, so NO and NO2.
I feel like I've heard of NO and NO2 quite a lot.
Yeah, so NO and NO2 are things that we emit from, say, our vehicles. So gasoline is mostly carbon-based compounds, but there's a little bit of either nitrogen in the gasoline or in the combustion process. There's nitrogen that gets emitted, and that tends to be emitted as NO. And NO and NO2, there's some chemistry that shuffles them back and forth a lot in the atmosphere. So there, NO and NO2, nitrogen oxides, you might hear NOx as an important air pollutant that we care about both in Colorado and other, especially areas with a lot of car and truck traffic.
So when you talk about some of this stuff, like I can't help but think that there's a need to have like this sort of information and knowledge base, like what you would have as a scientist, but these are all things that it sounds like you would need to have some sort of regulation or policy about. And so in your, like, how do you see your work connecting to kind of that as a scientist? How do you feel like you can connect into the world, like bring your knowledge to bear, so to speak, on the important aspects of sort of these kind of emissions regulation, you could say?
Yeah. So a lot of my PhD research has kind of focused in on wildfire smoke, but I've also done some research that's a little bit more directly relevant to understanding our air pollution and what activities contribute most to it here in Colorado. So I'll speak to that part first. Really briefly, in Colorado, we're driving cars. We have industry. If you drive down I-25, you see or maybe smell things in Commerce City, but there's actually industrial processes happening all over the Front Range. We also have a lot of oil and gas operations that either in the drilling process or the extraction process or the gathering process. There's a lot of different steps to oil and gas, might be emitting different air pollutants. And then mixed in with all of that, we also have a lot of agriculture, which will also emit some amount of some of these things. So I'll say quickly, we can measure a lot of these compounds in our atmosphere right outside, Fort Collins or or down closer to Denver, and we can use certain gases as tracers of different activities, and so we can kind of build up a knowledge base of which activities contribute most to various types of air pollution. So the thing that in Colorado Front Range we care most about is ozone in the summer. And so some of our research can be pretty directly, if we understand what's contributing most to the ozone problem, then hopefully that gives some policymakers and the broader community some information about what you might want to consider action on if you're going to try to control emissions of air pollutants. Coming back to wildfire smoke, that's obviously a little bit more difficult with wildfire smoke. Not that it's easy to control how much we emit when we drive or drill an oil and gas well or from a animal feedlot, say, but wildfires are going to happen. They are a natural process, one that we've perturbed a fair bit through ultimately climate change, and also some of our land use actions right on the ground. But they're not something that you can directly control. Try as hard as you can to snuff out all the fires, you're still going to have some. And so we actually are getting better at controlling our air pollution in general, which is great.
Didn't I read somewhere that the ozone hole is closing?
Yes. So an ozone is actually really interesting because the ozone hole itself is a phenomena up in the stratosphere.
Right.
And so there are things that we emit and have been emitting for the last many decades that we've been controlling that destroy ozone up in the stratosphere, which we care about because we actually want more ozone in the stratosphere. Ozone is good up high because it blocks UV rays that might contribute to skin cancer. But we want less ozone nearby because that we breathe in and then it does bad things for our lungs and
Gotcha.
a few other parts of our body. So yes, that's actually a success story, right? We've been controlling some of these things that cause stratospheric ozone depletion. And that's a great example of what we can do to control some of the things that we do that affect the environment.
Because that was a lot of policy that what made that happen.
Yeah, and that's often held up as kind of an example for international collaboration because it wasn't just the US, it wasn't just Europe or China or Japan or Australia that were emitting these things. It was everyone. A lot of them were used, a lot of these specific chemicals that we had to control were used in refrigeration, which I really enjoy having a cold beverage or keeping my leftovers safe for a few days. But, can we make refrigeration safer from an ozone perspective? Oh, did you lose me?
Yeah, but you're back.
So yes, the stratospheric ozone problem has actually been held up as a very great international success of international policy cooperation. The agreement that most countries, I think nearly all countries, have signed and have been following since the 90s is called the Montreal Protocol, after the city that it was hashed out in. And so people often, when we think about climate change, at its root, it's our emissions of carbon dioxide that are driving climate change. And so some people say, well, why can't we just do what do for climate change and CO2 emissions, what we did with the Montreal Protocol? And that's a great question and has some important parallels. Although one thing that is a little bit different about the two issues is that in the end, the companies producing these refrigerants, these chemicals that ended up destroying the stratosphere ozone, there are actually not that many of them. DuPont, there's actually a list that you can list of them. Whereas if you're going to try to tackle CO2 emissions, you have to name every person on the planet and every company on the planet, right? And so the scale of the problem is a little bit different. That said, it's a great example of international cooperation that has definitely been guiding some of the international climate policy and domestic climate policy as well. Different parts of it.
So it sounds like you are interested in policy.
Yeah.
Do you see this? Do you see this maybe shaping what your next step might be?
It just might have. Yes. That was a great segue. Yeah. So if it's not clear, I am pretty interested in how our understanding of the world and the science that we really enjoy doing, both from understanding the world and because it has impacts on humans, how that can be connected or translated or brought to bear on policy decisions that we make, both local, state, federal, and maybe even international level. So I've explored how science interacts with policy through a variety of different ways. Actually, even dating back to before I got to CSU, it's been a long-standing interest. My undergraduate degree was actually in environmental science and public policy. So I not only took science courses, but I also took, economics and social science courses about how our society interacts with science as well. So all of that has definitely been guiding what I'm interested in, what I want to work on. And there are a number of different opportunities for scientists to actually move into the policy sphere. So there's lots of different ways that scientists can interact with policy. Some of that is as an academic, maybe at CSU, I offer to be an expert to testify in this, Colorado State House or whatnot, or I interact with my local, air quality advisory board, which I am actually a part of in Fort Collins.
Wow.
But there are also, and I will say, Fort Collins is, as a city, is doing some really exciting, innovative things, especially for a city of its size. For a city, period, but for a smaller city, it's kind of on the forefront of a lot of really awesome environmental and climate related policies. So
that's one thing that I've been sort of like continuously struck by living here is how really at the forefront Fort Collins seems to be in terms of trying to do a lot more, like punching really above its weight in terms of how aggressive their mitigation targets are. Even, I mean, when you think about, well, how much can Fort Collins mitigate in the first place in terms of reducing its carbon emissions? Well, maybe that's beside the point. Like, we can still try and work hard to do a good job. And so it's really impressive. Especially, I mean, it's not exactly like we're in the heart of the most climate progressive part of the world. And so,
yeah, you got a lot of viewpoints in our area.
A lot of viewpoints here, but then they all sort of, for whatever reason, have coalesced around being quite serious around climate action, which is really cool. It's neat to live someplace that actually is kind of taking that seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I've only lived here for 5 years, but my understanding of the history is that the CSU and CSU employees, staff, professors, and students have really played a major role in kind of driving that focus of the city forward, especially in the last 10,
so Jacob,
years.
Actually, I gotta do two things real quick.
Sure.
First off, we have a question from our. I think we have millions of viewers right now. I'm not sure.
Trillions, maybe.
Must be.
But let's see. We've got a question here. This seems like a legit science question. Maybe you're going to have your PhD defense early. Jacob, do you think we've seen enough meaningful reductions to things like NOx or tropospheric ozone in recent weeks, reduced commuting, et cetera, to drive new guidance for air quality policies? So it's maybe like some COVID-19 pandemic-induced insights around air pollution. What do you think? Thank you for that comment, M. McGraw 71590.
Yes, M. McGraw. That is a great question. And I'll say, since I know M. McGraw, she was in my department and recently, last year defended her own PhD. She always asks really, really good questions. So I'll just throw that out there. That is it. So that's a really great question. There are, I will say, we don't probably know quite yet, but a lot of people in my atmospheric chemistry kind of community, scientific community, are eager to look at that question, and also in the policy community. This basically, the COVID pandemic has created a natural experiment. Now, that's not to say it's something that we want to have happened, but if it's happening, we are seeing major changes in, how often we drive, right? I've driven maybe once a week for the past 7 weeks, right? Or, we've shut down entire industries, et cetera. So we absolutely are seeing changes in the amount of air pollution that we emit from different things that we as humans do. And we will, as best as we can, safely continue to be gathering that kind of data. So it is important that we don't shut things off just without thinking. From like a monitoring perspective, we want to continue taking air samples and measuring the same things that we've been measuring. Satellites are really helpful in this respect, actually. So some of you might have seen a lot of these satellite kind of photos of before and after. A lot more red in the before photo than the latter one, signifying more NOx before than later. So I'll just summarize by saying there's almost certainly things what we will learn new about how we impact our air quality from this time. It will take a little bit to kind of vet that knowledge, right? We have to go through the scientific peer review process, and then it will take a little bit more time before that might impact how things are talked about from a policy perspective.
Yeah, of course.
it will. And I'll just finish up my long-winded explanation from before by saying my longstanding interest in policy has made me move into a role starting this coming September as a Congressional Science Fellow. So this is a
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. So this is actually a 1-year job. It's postdoc for policy, maybe. So a PhD level scientist gets to go to Washington, D.C., gets to work with a senator or representative or a congressional committee on hopefully scientific issues. Maybe it's something that I know a lot about, like wildfires and wildfire smoke. Maybe it's something I don't. Probably coronavirus will be on the issue index.
Yeah, I think everybody's like list of what they were thinking they were going to study is now probably shifted dramatically.
Very much so. But the long and short of it is that I will hopefully be bringing not just my expertise, but my knowledge of how to interpret science, how to communicate that science to people who want to know about it but don't have the same background I do, and try to connect people, scientists that I know, to the process better, and hopefully continue to bring more and more science. Not that science should be the only thing we make decisions on, but I firmly believe that scientific knowledge should buttress our decision making at the very least.
That's a really nice way of saying it, to buttress decision making. So on that note, and then we are going to have to say goodbye pretty soon. But before we go, this is a nice segue into sort of one of the main ways that I actually know you is through the Sustainability Leadership Fellows program. That's through SoGES. That's where Micah and I work. And so maybe you could just briefly, because some of the things you were just talking about in terms of being able to connect your science and talk about your science in a way that's intelligible to somebody who's, not a scientist. I mean, quite evidently you're able to do that because you've been doing it with us just now. But I guess, could you mention maybe one or two things that you learned as a Sustainability Leadership Fellow while you've been at CSU that has maybe helped you or made you think about this kind of process differently?
Absolutely, yeah. So the Sustainability Leadership Fellow or Sustainability Leadership Fellowship program that is run through SoGES gathers together a group of about 20 PhD students and postdocs. So students a little bit further along in their studies to learn about science communication, leadership, and some other professional development skills. And I've been lucky enough to be a part of that this past year. So, and this has definitely been one of the activities that I was eager to apply for and be able to participate in, because you get to learn some skills with your peers that can be directly relevant to connecting science to policy. So briefly, the main thing that really stands out is we have an amazing communication, in-person, kind of 2-day-long communications training, usually in the fall. And SoGES actually uses the network of the people that work in SoGES and bring in science communicator trainers. So these are usually either people that have a scientific background but have pivoted to training scientists about how to communicate their work, and also real live journalists. So people from radio, print, and even video journalism. And so we got to work with some of these science communicators and journalists and really practice, not just receive information about what we might think about when we're communicating our science, but really practice explaining, what we do or why we think something is important, or practice writing the first line in an op-ed. So that kind of training has been incredibly influential for how I've thought about communicating. I had seen some of that stuff in other trainings before. Luckily, there's no right place to get information on scientific communication. There's a lot of really good advice, but it's been something that's I've continued to carry with for the last year. And all of these experiences add up and lead you to where you are at any given moment in your life. So
That's great.
yeah, that's probably and through that process, that's a fairly intense kind of training. You really get to know the other participants in the program too, right? So
no doubt.
we come from all across CSU. We're all sustainability focused, physical, natural, and social scientists, but we're all interested in these issues both from a professional and a personal perspective. And so it's been really wonderful getting to know all of them. We actually a group of them and I organized a little event in February, right before everything.
It wasn't little.
Well, it was a fun event where we actually brought some grad students from all across campus, not necessarily a part of the sustainability leadership program, to New Belgium Brewery, and then brought all kinds of local community leaders from city council and Larimer County and the city departments all together. And so
it was great.
Yeah, so it's been really fun to learn with and get to know everyone in that program. It's been a little sad in the last couple of weeks because we've continued to have a few really nice trainings, but
yeah,
not the same. Interaction online is a little bit different. So
yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap things up with this interview, I'm one of the things that I feel like we can do in the bigger picture right now is think about how can we, what gives you hope? Like, why would you be wasting your time doing something related to sustainability if you didn't have some shred of hope or optimism about the future, right?
Yeah.
I think everybody who's in this work or doing this kind of stuff has to have like some kernel of hope or optimism. So I guess very briefly, what gives you hope? Like, what's the thing that's like kind of motivating you to get engaged with policy and to stick with this moving into the future?
That's a great question. I want to say that, and actually I feel like the time when we've all been locked down has reinforced this in some respects. Almost everyone that when you kind of distill things down that I've interacted with, or you can kind of see it in like social media, has an interest in the world we live in, right? And no one wants to have a world that's worse for their kids than the one we live in right now. No one wants to have a world that's worse next year than the one we live in right now.
Right. Yeah,
people
true.
may express that differently, and it may come out in our policies in a different way than some of us might like. But
right.
I don't see very many people as really not caring about their health and health of people that they love. And so
no one actually wants to see the world burn.
I think so. Yeah, that's my sense. And maybe somebody will say that's too optimistic, but I think we have to hold optimism somewhere. So anyway, I think what gives me hope is that humans are messy and complicated, but when you can try to bring people together around shared values, and I think science has a role not just to kind of explain how the world works to people, but also to show people why it's incredible and why what we know makes it such a great place to live. Anyway, that ended up being very high level, but
that's perfect though. That's perfect.
Yeah.
I think that's what motivates me.
I think our millions of audience members right now need to have that sort of high level motivation there. Okay, yeah. So with that, Jacob, it's been fantastic to have you as a guest this week. Thank you for giving your time. I really hope you feel better. Drink that tea and then go straight to bed.
Yeah.
Doctor's orders.
That's right.
Not that kind of doctor. But I do hope you feel better, and thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, and I'll just end by saying, this is not likely COVID, but maybe it is, and it's just a good reminder that even if we're starting to open up a little bit, be careful, because I don't feel like I've interacted with anyone, but here I am with a fever. So don't be paranoid, but also don't be lax.
Be safe. Yeah. Take care of yourself.
Yeah. So thanks so much
Okay,
for
well,
having me on.
thank you so much, Jacob.
Feel better.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay, so with that, I think we've got, that was a cool interview.
Yeah, that
I
was
feel
really
like I
cool
walked
interview.
away with like a ton of new information.
Yeah, I need to go kind of process it a little bit.
That's right. That's fair. Well, it's okay because we're at the beginning of the weekend. You've got a whole weekend to process
a
all
whole
that
weekend to
information about
process and think
trace
about
gases.
the joy of living in a world that is like as cool and scientific as the one that we live in.
That's true, exactly. Maybe go watch some Planet Earth. That's like a nice way to like kind of, or there's like a sprawl of different planet Earth, life, you name it.
Right.
Did you ever see Human Planet?
No, but I've heard of it.
It was pretty good, honestly. The funny thing though is I think depending on where you watched it, it had like different narrations, both male, female, and I think British and not British maybe. It was just kind of. I know it. I can't argue with that. Okay, so but before we go, there is one thing that we need to announce, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. So
right? Why don't you go for it?
Yeah. So Jacob was part of our 2019-2020 Sustainability Leadership Program, and today we just announced our new cohort. So we've got 20 new early career postdoc or PhD students, people that are going to be joining our Sustainability Leadership Program, and we're really excited to have them. And very soon, you're going to be able to go to the SoGES website and check them out. Not quite, but very soon. And yeah, they're going to be participating in the same kind of trainings that Jacob was talking about, and we're excited to be working with them all.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something also where it's like in this sort of time when everything is crazy and we're all sort of learning new things every single day, just about kind of the jobs that we're doing, or if you applied for an opportunity like Jacob was mentioning, like he's going to go be a policy fellow, but the policies and the topics that he's going to be work on might be radically transformed now. And so I think it's both kind of a scary time, but also there's almost like the energy of the moment also makes you focus in a different way, even if it's on different things. It's sort of maybe it adds new purpose or something else to what you're doing and why. But with that, I think we should probably wrap things up. Thank you so much for co-hosting again, Micah.
Yeah, happy to do it. It's always fun.
A wonderful time. I hope that you will join us next time. We'll make sure to, we got to figure out a way to like kind of provide updates. Maybe we should send out we should start is it an email list? Is that still a thing?
It could be.
It could be. I'm trying to think how do the kids communicate these days? Like, how are we supposed to TikTok? So I should send out a TikTok. Like, this is what we're doing. Like next week.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I don't even really know. We'll brainstorm. Okay, we'll come up with a way to spread the word.
Yeah.
But since we've got millions of listeners right now, it should be pretty easy to get that word out, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Yeah. See you at the next Sustainability Happy Hour. Oh, we didn't even plan that. Okay. Happy weekend.
Bye.